On the line, joining us right now is a very special guest, Fraidy Reiss. How are you today? You wrote an article, America's Child Marriage Problem, in the New York Times, an op-ed, and you are the founder and executive director of Unchained at Last, a nonprofit that helps women escape arranged and forced marriages. And today's op-ed in the Times, America's Child Marriage Problem. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much.
This was something I was surprised about. I mean, I've been fighting, for example, for same-sex marriage for a long time, and I've been hearing about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of children, and yada, yada. And now I come to find that you have all these America's child marriages, and I was surprised. All these conservatives that were so concerned about, gay marriage, and suddenly they've been rather silent on child marriage.
Yeah, this came as a surprise to even all of us here at Unchained at Last. This was something that I think nobody realized was happening. Nobody was paying attention to it. And I was very glad to see the New York Times publish the op-ed and raise awareness about this. And perhaps we can now solve this problem now that it's no longer a secret. And
a couple reasons that these are occurring, and one you said is parental coercion and parental consent. Why would any parent in their right mind consent to their underage son or daughter marrying? I picture this to be in, developing countries where, not in the United States, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I was very surprised to know that the parents would try to marry their underage kids in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is surprising, but it does happen here in the U.S., as they showed in the op-ed. And parents do give many reasons for doing it. Often they're doing it in their children's best interest, or what they think is their children's best interest. So sometimes it's to control their children's behavior or sexuality, to protect family honor. Often there's an economic reason for it as well, to enhance their own status. So there are many different reasons that it happens in many, many different communities here in the U.S.
Well, if you get caught having sex with somebody who's underage, you go to jail, but you can marry somebody underage? How?
This is one of the shocking things that we found, is that age of consent laws are not matching up with minimum marriage age laws. So in New Jersey, for example, we found that judges were allowed and actually were issuing marriage licenses to couples that had either an age or age difference that should have triggered a statutory rape investigation, not a marriage license. And this is the really shocking thing, where we actually had a 10-year-old married in New Jersey in 2006. And married, by the way, to an adult.
And who approved this?
So this is the problem with the data that we were able to retrieve from the Office of Vital Statistics, which is in the Department of Health. It included only numbers. So we know the ages of the parties involved, but there are absolutely no other data provided. So we don't know the demographics. We don't know which county. We don't know which judges. What I would like is for the state attorney general in every state to investigate, to find out how many children were married in the state recently. Was there a statutory rape issue here? Was there a judge? Were there family members who were complicit in these statutory rapes?
And this problem, is it one where it's mostly women who were forced to marry, girls, or are there boys that are forced to marry as well?
There are boys that are forced to marry as well, but in the two states that we looked at, and I know that we have a partner organization that pulled the number in another state as well, it's disproportionately affecting women and girls. So in New Jersey, for example, 90%. In New York, it was a little bit more difficult to crunch those numbers because New York City data are kept separately and they don't differentiate between girl and boy. But if you look at New York State, separately from New York City, again, overwhelmingly almost 90% girls. So across the world, forced marriage and child marriage do affect men and boys, but overwhelmingly this is affecting girls and women.
Who's in favor of this? I mean, I can't imagine any politicians supporting these types of laws, but yet they are on the books. How did they get there? Was it they harken back to a time when this was acceptable in society, or is this? I mean, explain how did these laws get on the books, and why don't we have politicians? You think they'd be raving over this and raging and going crazy? This would be the perfect issue for a family values politician. Yet they're silent.
Right. So I think that these laws have been on the books for a very long time. I know in New Jersey this is many, many decades old, and they probably hark back to a time where it was very important in society for a girl not to have a child out of wedlock, and it was So it was considered better for a 12-year-old girl to get married than to have an abortion or to have a child on her own, or with her family's help, as opposed to being married. And so I think that there are politicians just for the most part, didn't realize that these laws were still on the books. Or what I suspect happened as well is that maybe they thought it was on the books, but they thought, okay, but this isn't really happening, which is actually what we thought at Unchained. When we retrieved the data, we thought that we would find that nobody was using these parental consent and judicial approval exceptions, and that therefore our argument was going to be, nobody's using these anyway, let's eliminate these, let's take them off the books.
And what is the profile of those who are marrying underage girls? Are these rich men that are paying to do this, or is this a situation where this is mostly religious cults or religious fundamentalists? Who's actually doing this by and large?
Well, that's hard to say. If you look at the numbers that we pulled again from Vital Statistics in New York and New Jersey, they did not have any demographic information, so we don't know who these people were. But I can tell you from my experience at Unchained at Last, I work with forced marriage survivors, many of whom were married as children. And there was also the survey that I quoted in the op-ed that talks, the one that was done by the Tahari Justice Center in 2011 and looked at the 2-year period leading up to that. Both of those show the demographics are really, these communities are really widespread. There are many, many different communities. The Tahari Justice Center focuses on immigrant communities, and so it identified child and or forced marriage in immigrant communities from 56 different countries of origin. So that's really, really widespread. But it also found, even though it wasn't looking for it, the survey kind of stumbled upon this happening in American families as well, or so-called American families, whatever you would call that. And in our experience here at Unchained at Last, we've also seen from many different communities, often it's a religious community, but not always. Sometimes it's cultural or just one individual family deciding to do this.
And this is something that you think is going to be changed. I guess you're working on legislation. What is it going to take to change this, and what are your efforts to make this a relic of the past?
Well, in New York and New Jersey, I have written legislation that I'm working now to get introduced. It eliminates both the parental consent and judicial exceptions so that marriage becomes something that happens at age 18. Marriage is a legal contract, and like other legal contracts, it should be reserved for people who have reached the legal age of majority. And here in New Jersey, that's 18, so that makes sense to limit marriage to those who are 18 or older. So that's New York and New Jersey, and after that, there are 48 states to go where legislators in every single state need to take a look at this and need to pass legislation to eliminate the exceptions that allow children to get married.
Yeah, you'd think some of these people would catch a clue when somebody asked, what did you do for your first anniversary? They said they went to Chuck E. Cheese. It's like, oh, that's kind of creepy. So you look at the global situation, and 88% of countries set 18 at the minimum marriage age, but we're not one of them. So this is yet a global problem. And you wrote that more than 700 million women alive today were married before 18, including some 250 million who wed before 15. That is a huge global problem, but it doesn't seem to be on the international agenda as it should be.
Mm-hmm. It is staggering when you think of more than 700 million women. That is more than 1 in 3 women alive today who have had their economic, health, and education opportunities undermined by child marriage and who are at increased risk of experiencing violence because of a child marriage. That is just staggering. That is something that needs to change. And you're right that 88% of countries set 18 as the minimum marriage age. And generally speaking, the U.S. does too, but more than half of all countries, about 52%, do allow minor girls to get married with parental consent. And so this is a problem across the world.
And what is the impact on the child who is thrust in this situation in terms of their health and education and across the gamut? What happens to them? What does their future look like because of this situation?
Well, that's the scary thing, is that studies have shown that it has a significant impact on them. So their health is impacted. Having a child, so often they're going to get pregnant and have children when they're too young to do that, and that's going to affect their health. Education, often this means that they're not allowed to continue their schooling, and that affects their chances of ever becoming financially independent. So, of course, these girls become more likely to end up living in poverty, and their chances of getting divorced are much higher. And so they're much more likely to get divorced and end up living in poverty with their health impacted by the fact that they've had a child too young, if they even survive that pregnancy. And then, again, it's also the domestic violence issue, where this makes it much more likely that they will experience violence as well. So this is a really, really horrific experience for a girl to be married off at a young age. And again, often these are forced marriages. This is not the girl's choice.
And what can people do to help you combat America's child marriage problem? Where can they reach you? And do you have any specific things people you'd want them to do to make sure this problem is something of the past?
Yeah, several things. Well, first of all, we have information on the legislation we're proposing in New York and New Jersey on our website, unchained.last.org. We've started a petition that we want people to sign to eliminate child marriage in every state in the U.S. And what I hope also that people in other states will do is go to your health department, go to your state health department and ask for the numbers. Find out how many children were married in your state and publicize those numbers, and then start pushing the legislators in your state to end this problem.
Thank you so much for the work you're doing and, of course, for being on The Wayne Besson Show. Fraidy Reiss, founder and executive director of Unchained at Last, a nonprofit that helps women escape arranged and forced marriages. And if they're lucky, Josh Duggar, too. Thanks. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Oh, thank you. Bye-bye.
This is The Wayne Besson Show on WCPT Chicago's Progressive Talk. And by the way, you can comment on Facebook.com/The Wayne Besson Show, and hear any show on our podcast.